What's up, guys? I wanted to take the time real fast to kind of go over a few of the lures that I'm using this time of year. In Missouri, where I'm at, we haven't quite hit spawn yet. The water temperature is not quite the 55, 60 degrees. We are seeing some of the bass, largemouth bass, going into the shallows and some of the flats. They haven't quite spawned yet. I've had a few people ask me here recently, hey man, what do you throw in? What are you using? And I've got a couple guys that we do tournaments and stuff like that, that I think we're all on pretty much the same page where we're really just waiting for the spawn. It just hasn't came yet. So I want to go over a few lures that I'm finding success with right now before spawn, right before, that water temperature gets 55, 60 degrees surface temperatures. We have had turnover, so we have a lot of moss, we have a lot of cover. We're seeing a lot of topwater vegetation. So that kind of plays an effect to where I'm at. One of my favorite topwater lures to use is a buzzbait. A lot of action, a lot of sound, and the blowups are pretty typically huge, so it gets your adrenaline going. I've got two buzzbait setups that I use pretty frequently. The one with the nice little toad on there, and then an all blacked out minnow. I'm going to use this blacked out minnow as soon as I get on the water, whether it be 5:30 in the morning, something in that nature, where the sun is just peaking the hills, so you see a lot of action on this early in the morning. I love this guy with the toad here, anywhere around vegetation. So I'm seeing a lot of success right now where I'm fishing at with the moss and the grass on top of the water. And I typically just burn this guy in. I'm going to throw it out there. I've got a really fast retrieving reel, and I'm just going to burn it in huge strikes out of nowhere. It's not something that I typically fish slow. If I'm looking at fishing topwater slow, I'm going to fish two things. I'm going to fish a topwater popper, or I'm going to fish a frog. So these are my little frogs I got. I love them. I've got a few different variations, whether it have like a red tip on the back or not. I always clip the tails of them to about 1.5 inches long. I don't like the really long tails. The one thing I do with these that I'm finding with success right now this time of year, around the vegetation and moss that I have, is fishing them really slow. So I'm going to throw it, make sure I hit the bank or some kind of cover that I'm looking for, maybe a lily pad. I am starting to see some lily pads come up. And I'm just going to pop it real slow, or walk the dog with it really slow. I may even walk it a foot and then pause it and let it stay, and walk it a foot, pause it, and let it stay. I'm not going to fish this on open water, obviously, but I'm going to try to fish a good 10-foot section or so of where I'm seeing a lot of that moss at, and I'm having some decent success with it. The other thing I like is I've got a Lucre Hunter frog here. They are great. Nice little leg actions and things of that nature. I typically throw these around lily pads, almost specifically, and I have a lot of success with it. But right now, those topwater lures, I really enjoy the all blacked out minnow and the toad. Those are awesome. I'm seeing a lot of success. Now, my favorite topwater lure in all circumstances, all the time, all year round, is the Stanley Ribbit Frog. This is by far my favorite topwater lure on the face of the earth. One thing I do enjoy, they do make a hollow body that is completely squishy, and it's very successful. It does have a hole in it, so you can put a rattle or something in that nature, or you can put, some people put scent stuff or things like that in there. Very successful lure. And the one thing that I'm going to use with that is I'm going to use a double hook setup with a little bit weight on the end of it. And what that's going to do is that's going to keep that frog flat. So you're not seeing that frog flip over whenever you retrieve it. Outside of topwater, I'm using a couple main baits if I'm not getting topwater, or maybe I didn't get on the water early like I like to, and maybe the water's calm, there's no wind or anything like that, and the water's clear. I may jump out of topwater and may get into a few other things. Pretty typical for me also. I try to avoid hard baits as much as possible. I really enjoy fishing soft baits, but I do like lipless crankbaits. And right now with the vegetation where I'm at, the moss and the grass and some of the lily pads, I love ripping lipless crankbaits through that, and you see some massive strikes as soon as you get on that line of where that vegetation ends. Another thing I like is the blue and black jig setups. This is a swim jig that I kind of decided to put a crawl on. Now the crawls from Goonigan Baits, and then they are an amazing bait company when it comes to plastics. I fish their Ned rigs as well, which these are their little Ned worms, and they do have rattles on them. One side is going to be green, the other side is going to be a bluish tint. You're going to rig that up on just a little small jig head, and they are amazing. I love Ned rigs. That's one of the other baits that I'm using right now. Their versatility is phenomenal, and I'll even use a Ned rig on these little crawls. And right now with the water temperature starting to warm up, bass getting into the shallows, I'm starting to see some crawls are starting to really become successful as well. One of the other lures, due to the fact the water temperature hasn't raised quite to where that I would like it to be able to catch some of those monsters and spawn, is a jerk bait. Fishing it a little bit slower. Some of the fish still kind of cold and haven't quite warmed up yet. You know, they're not as crazy as what they'll be during spawn. So you can fish a suspending jerk bait or a diving jerk bait. This is a diving jerk bait. I have one the same color as suspending jerk bait. So if you're realizing you need to slow your lures down a little bit and maybe fish them in a way that the bass don't have to chase them as fast, I would definitely recommend a jerk bait. A suspending jerk bait is amazing. Especially I like them between about the 4 and 6 foot range. And just kind of slowly retrieve it, and you'll see some success there. If you ever have any questions, you're ever wanting me to go over a video of what lures to use, what lures not to use, or you want me to kind of show you how to use a specific lure and do a tutorial, I absolutely can do that. Just send me a message and I'll get to that. Those are basically the lures that I'm using right now. A big thing that I try my hardest to understand is what my fish are eating in the areas and the locations that I'm fishing, whether the water is muddy or clear, what's the visibility of that. But right now, a big success that I'm seeing are going to be on buzzbaits super early in the morning, some frogs, things of that nature, depending on the vegetation and where you're at. And then dropping it from top to bottom, going into some kind of Ned rigged worm setup or something like that, or a jig. Now, again, like I said, if you're noticing those fish being a little bit slower, they're not wanting to hit that bait that's going by super fast, then I would definitely recommend jerk bait. Again, these are just the lures that I've been finding success with. I've been trying to go out there and fish 3-4 days a week right now, really waiting for this spawn to kick off and see if I can catch some monsters. But again, if you want to see me do a video on something specific, just shoot me a message, and I'll get back to it as soon as I can. I have no problem going over, depending on the lures that you're wanting. Now, I did have a guy the other day send me a message wanting me to go over a lure about a duck. I don't own a duck. I haven't quite found one whenever I went to a few different shops, so it may take a second for me to find the lure that you were recommending, and it may take a second for me to use it on multiple occasions to see how I feel about it, but I will get to it. Just send me a message, and hey, tight lines.